The artificial lights of Nexus Station cast a pale, unforgiving glow over Gate 37, where the endless tide of travelers moved like a living current, merchants shouting over docking fees, security drones whirring above, the sharp scent of ozone and metal saturating the air. Amid the chaos sat Tiana Envaro, her slender blue hands clasped tightly in her lap, her luminescent skin dulled to a melancholy shade beneath the flickering overhead lamps. The white lace headband she still wore, a remnant of her discarded uniform, felt like an insult now, a cruel reminder of everything she'd lost. "You're a thief," her employer's voice still echoed in her head, cold and triumphant. She hadn't stolen anything. Not the useless crystal figurine they'd accused her of taking. Not even a crumb from the lavish tables she used to clean. She'd given years of service, smiled when insulted, endured whispers about her alien blood. But on Nexus Station, truth held no value without power to enforce it. Her calm device blinked softly in her palm, showing her remaining balance 47 credits. Not enough for the shuttle home. Not enough for her mother's medicine. Not enough for anything. Her throat tightened as she imagined little Mira back on the colony, her daughter's bright eyes waiting at the door, her mother's gentle voice asking if she'd found work yet. She wanted to scream at the injustice of it all, but found no strength left to even cry. Then, as if the universe itself exhaled, a small, battered water bottle rolled across the polished floor and stopped against her boot. Tiana blinked, instinct taking over where reason had faltered. She reached down, picking it up. A man was struggling a few meters away, one leg encased in a rigid medical cast, the other supporting him awkwardly as he tried to balance on a pair of crutches. His coat was expensive, finely woven, but his exhaustion was plain. Without thinking, Tiana rose and crossed the distance, her heels clicking softly on the cold floor. "Your water, sir," she said, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. The man looked up, gray eyes sharp even in fatigue. He studied her not with the dismissive curiosity of humans assessing aliens, but with genuine focus, as if trying to see beyond her words. "Thank you, miss," he said, accepting the bottle with a nod. The accent was refined. Terran upper belt, the kind that usually came with wealth or lineage. "You seem troubled. Forgive my presumption, but is everything all right?" His tone wasn't intrusive. It was careful, deliberate. Compassion wrapped in discipline. Perhaps it was the sincerity in his voice. Or maybe it was simply that no one had asked her that question in weeks. But Tiana found herself answering. Words spilled out how she'd been accused, fired, stranded. How her mother's treatment would lapse without the next payment. How her daughter waited on a promise she could no longer keep. When she finished, shame pressed hot behind her eyes. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I shouldn't burden a stranger." "No apology necessary," the man replied, his gaze unwavering. "I find myself in need of trustworthy people, miss." "Envaro, Tiana Envaro." "Thomas Blackwell," he said, and only then did she notice the subtle insignia on his sleeve and etched silver crest that gleamed faintly under the station lights. The name was familiar. Blackwell Industries was synonymous with vast wealth and political influence across 17 systems. "My housekeeper retired recently," he continued, his voice calm but decisive. "And this blasted leg makes managing alone rather difficult. Would you consider taking her place? Room, board, and a generous salary." Tiana stared, certain she'd misheard. "Sir, you don't know me." "I know enough," he said simply. "You could have ignored my water." "You didn't." He tapped his cane gently. "Compassion can't be faked." The words struck something deep within her, a spark of warmth breaking through the cold numbness. Her mind screamed that it was too good, too fast, too dangerous, but her heart whispered that sometimes fate spoke softly and quickly. "When would I start?" she asked. Immediately, Thomas replied, a faint smile touching his lips. Once you're settled, I'll see that your family joins you. No one deserves to fight alone. As they walked toward the private docking bay, his stride measured and hers hesitant, Tiana looked up at the massive viewport. Beyond the glass, the curve of New Geneva's ocean shimmered like a promise. She didn't know this man or the world waiting below, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to believe that kindness, simple, uncalculated kindness, might still exist in the galaxy dot the shuttle descended through. New Geneva's pearlescent atmosphere, its sleek frame humming with quiet power. Below, sunlight glittered across the sprawling coastline, where mountains kissed the sea and terraced gardens bloomed in colors Tiana had never seen. The air shimmered with a clarity no orbital dome could imitate. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to breathe without fear. Thomas Blackwell stood beside her at the viewport, leaning slightly on his cane, the wind from the cabin's pressure vents ruffling his silver hair. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he murmured. His reflection in the glass was calm, unreadable, but his tone carried a wistful pride. "My grandfather built Blackwell Manor on those cliffs. Said he wanted to wake each morning reminded of how small we are next to creation." Tiana followed his gaze to the elegant, white sprawl of the estate that emerged between the ridges like a dream sculpted into marble. "It's magnificent," she said softly. "More than I've ever imagined." She hesitated, glancing down at her plain clothes. "I'm not sure I belong in a place like that." Thomas smiled faintly. "Belonging isn't dictated by wealth, Miss Enviro. It's earned through purpose." His words lingered with her long after they touched down. A uniformed man awaited them at the landing pad, posture straight as a blade. "Welcome home, Mr. Blackwell," he said crisply. His gaze flicked to Tiana with polite indifference. "And our guest?" "Not a guest," Thomas corrected evenly. "Miss Enviro is joining the staff. Show her to the East Wing quarters." "Of course, sir," the man Harrison replied, though his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Inside, the manor was a labyrinth of elegance. Sunlight filtered through tall windows framed by cascading vines, and marble corridors stretched in serene silence. Paintings from a dozen worlds adorned the walls, portraits of humans, aliens, and hybrid families, each face carrying quiet dignity. Tiana followed Harrison through the stillness, her footsteps echoing softly on the polished floors. Her quarters turned out to be a private suite overlooking the gardens, far grander than she'd dared expect. The bed was wrapped in silken sheets, the air faintly perfumed with lavender. "Mr. Blackwell insists all staff are well accommodated," Harrison said with mechanical courtesy. "Dinner is served at 8. He requests your presence at the main table." When he left, the door sealed behind him with a gentle hiss, and Tiana exhaled a long breath. She touched the edge of the window pane, watching the distant waves crash against the cliffs below. The world outside seemed too perfect, too silent, like a painting that might crack if stared at too long. She showered and changed into the crisp uniform laid out for her, a refined version of her maid's attire, black and white with subtle gold trim. When she stepped into the dining hall later that evening, she felt the weight of every detail. The vaulted ceiling glittered with crystalline chandeliers, and a fire burned low in the marble hearth. Thomas sat at the head of the table, dressed not as a billionaire, but as a man at ease in his own home collar open, sleeves rolled to his forearms. He rose when she entered, offering a warm smile that eased her nerves. "Please sit," he said. "I find formalities tiresome when there are only two people." Over the meal, they spoke easily. He asked about her homeworld, her daughter, her mother's health. She learned that he'd once studied medicine before turning to industry, that he disliked politics but understood its necessity, that he valued honesty above almost everything. He listened when she spoke, truly listened, and it disarmed her. When she confessed her fear that this kindness might be temporary, he only said, "Every lasting bond begins with trust. Let's start there." After dinner, Tiana wandered through the moonlit gardens. The air carried the faint tongue of salt and blooming flora that glowed faintly under the twin moons. She trailed her fingers along the edge of a fountain, mesmerized by the way starlight danced on the water. "Couldn't sleep either?" The voice startled her, low and familiar. Thomas stood nearby on the terrace, leaning against the stone balustrade. In the silver glow, he looked younger, the sharpness in his features softened by something she couldn't quite name. "It's quiet here," she said, joining him. "Too quiet, maybe. After years on space stations, silence feels unnatural," he agreed. "But I've come to value it. In silence, truth has room to breathe." Their conversation drifted like the tide, gentle, unhurried. When she laughed at one of his dry remarks, his gaze lingered, thoughtful. Then, without meaning to, he reached forward and brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek. The touch was fleeting, respectful, yet charged with an electricity that made her heart stutter. "Forgive me," he said quickly. "You didn't offend me," she whispered. Something flickered in his eyes, something fragile and human. "You should rest," he said after a moment, though his voice had softened. "Tomorrow will be a long day." As Tiana returned to her room, she caught sight of a door she hadn't noticed before unmarked, recessed into the far wall of the corridor. It was locked, its frame lined with a faint hum of energy. From beyond came a distant mechanical rhythm, steady, almost like breathing. She hesitated, then turned away. Whatever secrets this manor held, they were not hers to uncover. Not yet, but as she slipped into bed, the echo of Thomas's touch lingered against her skin, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something momentous had already begun, something that would test not only her loyalty, but her heart. Morning light streamed through the glass walls of the manor, painting the marble floors in soft gold. Tiana woke to the sound of waves far below, a rhythm both foreign and comforting. Her first 3 days at Blackwell Manor passed in a delicate balance routine laced with curiosity. She learned the rhythms of the household, the gardeners tending to bioluminescent plants imported from Kevers 4, the chefs preparing meals that blended human and invariant spices, the hum of distant machinery that she now realized came from beneath the estate rather than beyond it. Thomas was courteous, but distant during the day, buried in meetings and holographic conferences, his calm device perpetually glowing with encrypted transmissions. But in the evenings, he'd find her sometimes in the garden, sometimes in the library, and their conversations would stretch into hours. He had a gift for listening, for turning silence into connection. When he laughed, it was quiet but genuine, and each time it happened, Tiana felt the world shift a little closer to something she didn't dare name. Yet, under the surface beauty, something in the manor felt wrong. The West Wing remained sealed, and though Harrison's efficiency bordered on perfection, his politeness felt like armor. The staff spoke softly of restricted sectors, of deliveries arriving at odd hours, of power fluctuations no one was supposed to notice. On the 4th night, Tiana's unease overcame her caution. She left her quarters after midnight, her bare feet silent against the cold floor. The corridor lights dimmed automatically, leaving her in the faint glow of emergency strips. She followed. The sound she had heard before, a low mechanical pulse, steady as a heartbeat. It led her to the unmarked door at the far end of the hall. The biometric lock shimmered faintly, reading her presence. She hesitated, then remembered something from her years, cleaning private labs' maintenance ports designed for emergency overrides. Crouching, she traced the edge of the frame until her fingers brushed a small indentation. Her bioelectric field, a quirk of invariant physiology, often considered inconvenient, responded to the embedded sensors. A soft click. The door slid open. The air beyond was warmer, humid, tinged with antiseptic. She stepped inside and froze. The room was vast, filled with humming equipment and the faint blue glow of containment tanks. Inside 3 of them floated beings unlike any she had ever seen, translucent forms suspended in luminous liquid, their tendrils swaying like strands of silk. Recognition struck her. Athetherans, the lost scientists whose disappearance had ignited panic across 17 systems. The Consortium had claimed they died in an accident. Yet here they were alive, hidden. I see curiosity got the better. Of you. Thomas's voice came from behind her, calm but edged. Tiana spun, heart-hammering. He stood framed in the doorway, the light outlining his sharp features, his cane tapping lightly against the floor. I'm sorry, she stammered. I shouldn't be here. No, he said quietly, stepping forward. You shouldn't. But since you are, he gestured toward the tanks, you deserve to understand what you've walked into. He explained in measured tones. The Athetherans had been working on a regenerative cure for Holloway, syndrome, a degenerative neural disease ravaging millions. The Consortium, which profited from lifelong treatment contracts, labeled their research dangerous and ordered their execution. Thomas, once one of the Consortium's intelligence operatives, had smuggled the survivors out during the purge. You're risking everything, Tiana whispered. If they find out, they will, he said simply. Eventually. But until then, I'll do what I can to finish what they started. His gray eyes met hers, intense and searching. Do you think me foolish? I think you're brave, she said. And kind. You didn't have to tell me any of this. I didn't, he agreed softly. But I wanted to. Because from the moment I met you, I knew you weren't someone who looks away when things get hard. They stood in silence, the faint hum of the machines filling the air. Then his hand lifted almost of its own accord, fingertips brushing her cheek, the same gesture as before, but this time slower, deliberate. The warmth of his skin against hers made her breath hitch. Thomas, she began, but the word faded as he leaned closer. I told myself not to feel this, he murmured, his voice rough. But every time you look at me, I forget the reasons why. Her pulse fluttered in her throat. She could smell the faint trace of ozone and his cologne, something grounding amid the unreality of it all. My people believe touch carries truth, she whispered. That when 2 souls connect, there's no hiding who they are. Then what do you see? He asked. She smiled faintly. A man trying to save the universe, one impossible act at a time. He laughed softly, the sound tinged with disbelief, and then his lips met hers. The kiss was hesitant at first, testing, then deepened with the force of unspoken need. When they finally parted, both were trembling, caught between fear and wonder. You're in danger now, he said quietly. Knowing this, being near me, then we'll face it together, she replied. He looked at her for a long time, then nodded, as if sealing an unspoken vow. Neither noticed the faint hum of a surveillance drone slipping past the window, its sensor light blinking once before vanishing into the night, carrying their secret to enemies already closing in. Dawn broke pale and cold over the cliffs of New Geneva, the wind carrying salt spray across the manicured gardens of Blackwell Manor. From her window, Tiana watched the ocean churn far below, its endless rhythm mirroring the restlessness in her chest. The kiss from the night before haunted her, not with regret, but with the terrifying realization that something within her had shifted. She wasn't merely grateful to Thomas anymore. She was bound to him, drawn by the same gravity that pulled the waves toward the shore. When she entered the breakfast room, she found him already there, sleeves rolled, a data slate open beside a half-finished cup of black coffee. He looked different, not just tired, but preoccupied. We may have a problem, he said without preamble. A soft chime punctuated his words, as the estate AI displayed surveillance footage in the air. 3 small drones glimmered in the recording, hovering near the property line before vanishing into the clouds. "Consortium scouts," he muttered. "They've found us." Harrison appeared in the doorway, his composure strained. "Director Krell has requested an inspection this afternoon, sir. He claims it's routine." Thomas gave a humorless laugh. Nothing about Krell is routine. He glanced at Tiana. "I'll need your help today. You'll pose as my administrative aide. It's safer if you're in plain sight." Her pulse quickened, but she nodded. "Whatever you need." When the shuttle arrived, the air seemed to darken with it. Director Krell was taller than any human, his gray-scaled skin rippling faintly as he moved, 4 lidless eyes tracking everything at once. He offered a thin smile that never reached his voice. "Mr. Blackwell," he said, stepping into the grand foyer, "how refreshing to see you keeping busy after your difficult years." His tone dripped with venom disguised as civility. Thomas gestured toward the conference room, every inch the gracious host masking a soldier's precision. Tiana followed, her heart pounding. The meeting unfolded like a duel. Krell's questions sharp, Thomas's answers sharper. "Your import manifests show a spike in biotech shipments," Krell said. "Purely medical research," Thomas replied. "Prosthetics for border veterans." "How noble," Krell purred, his lower pair of eyes flicking toward Tiana. "And your staff?" "I wasn't aware Invarian refugees held clearance to work on New Geneva." Tiana felt the room tighten. Thomas's jaw flexed. "Miss Invaro has full authorization," he said evenly. "And my complete trust." Krell's smirk widened. "Of course. Trust is such a fragile thing." When the inspection ended, he left with a final warning. "We'll return soon with proper authorization." As his shuttle vanished into the clouds, the tension broke. Harrison exhaled. "He knows." "Not enough," Thomas said grimly. He turned to Tiana. "Pack essentials. We move the Ephetherans tonight." The manor transformed into organized chaos. Hidden panels slid open to reveal armored corridors, vehicles loaded in the subterranean hangar. The Ephetherans' tanks were prepared for transport, glowing faintly under dim lights. One of them stirred, Professor Lin, awake at last. Through a translator, his melodic voice filled the chamber. "The others remain weak, but your protection has preserved us. However, time is short." Mira, who had slipped inside despite her mother's instructions, approached the tank, eyes wide. "You're glowing," she said softly. The Ephetheran extended a tendril toward her, stopping just short of her forehead. "This child," the translator echoed, "carries a rare genetic pattern, the Valkyrie sequence, the final stabilizer we lacked." Tiana froze. "What does that mean?" "It means," said Lina, appearing at her daughter's side, "that our family's bloodline holds the key to curing Holloway syndrome." Her voice trembled, weighted by memory. "I was part of their research decades ago. I thought I'd forgotten." Thomas looked between them, realization dawning. "Your mother was an Ephetheran subject?" "A volunteer," Lina corrected, "until the Consortium shut the program down." Professor Lin's eyes brightened. "With samples from 3 generations, the cure can be completed within hours." The promise of salvation hung in the air, but it was shattered by the thunder of distant explosions. Harrison's voice burst through the comms. "Consortium dropships inbound. They're breaching the perimeter. Get them to the tunnel," Thomas ordered. The estate shuddered as plasma fire lit the sky. He turned to Tiana. "Take your family and the Ephetherans." "Go. Not without you," she insisted, gripping his arm. "I have to hold them off," he said, pressing a pulse pistol into her hand. "You're stronger than you know." Their eyes met, one heartbeat stretched into eternity. Then she kissed him once, fierce and desperate. "If you die," she whispered, "I'll find you and drag you back." His laugh was broken but genuine. "I'll take that as motivation." The corridors roared with alarms as Tiana led the others toward the hidden passage. Behind her, the mansion's upper levels exploded in white fire. Through the smoke she glimpsed Thomas, standing tall amid chaos, his cane cast aside, firing with the precision of a soldier reborn. He was no longer the weary billionaire she'd met at Gate 37. He was something far greater, a man fighting not for profit or pride, but for the future of every life their love had touched. As the tunnel doors sealed behind her, the sound of battle echoed through the stone, fading into the rhythmic thunder of her own heartbeat. Somewhere above, the sea crashed against the cliffs, as if the world itself were mourning or applauding the courage of a single human who had chosen compassion over empire. The mountain wind howled through the narrow crevices of the evacuation tunnel, carrying the scent of ozone and smoke from the burning manor far above. The emergency lights flickered weakly, throwing long shadows against the steel walls as Tiana led her mother, daughter, and the 3 glowing Ethetherin tanks deeper into the subterranean corridor. Her breath came in ragged bursts, heart pounding not just from exertion, but from fear for the man still fighting behind them. The echoes of gunfire had faded minutes ago, replaced by the distant rumble of explosions. Every step away from the surface felt like both an escape and a betrayal. She forced herself to focus. Mira stumbled on a patch of loose stone, and Tiana caught her, pulling the small girl close. "Keep your eyes forward, little star," she whispered. "We're almost there. But what about Mr. Blackwell?" Mira's voice quivered. Tiana couldn't answer. Lena glanced back, her expression grim but resolute. "He'll find us," the elder said quietly. "Men like him don't die easily." At last, the tunnel opened into a cavernous chamber lit by soft amber light, the mountain facility Thomas had built in secret. Sleek consoles lined the walls, and medical pods glimmered with readiness. Harrison was already there, coordinating the transfer with practiced efficiency. "We lost contact with the surface 5 minutes ago," he reported as Tiana entered. "No word from Mr. Blackwell or Bowman's team." "He'll come," she said firmly, forcing conviction into her voice. "We start the cure now." Professor Lin floated closer, his form radiating faint light. "Agreed. The genetic samples your mother and daughter provided have completed the sequence. Once synthesized, it can reverse the neural decay in hours." Tiana swallowed hard. "Then let's save him before he runs out of time." They worked quickly, every motion fueled by desperation. Lena's calm hands guided the instruments. Mira passed tools as though guided by instinct, and the alien biolabs thrummed with energy. Outside, thunder rolled the atmospheric distortion of Consortium dropships closing in. Reeves's voice crackled through the Kung channel. "We've secured a perimeter, but they're bringing armor. 30 minutes at best." Harrison looked at Tiana, his usual stoicism fraying. "He's right. If we're going to save Blackwell, it's now or never." And then, almost as if conjured by their thoughts, the inner doors hissed open. Thomas staggered inside, leaning heavily on his cane, his face pale, one arm bloodied. Behind him came Captain Malcolm Reeves, older, harder, but unmistakably alive. "Blackwell, you magnificent bastard," Reeves said, gripping his shoulder. "Still finding trouble." "Good to see you too, Captain," Thomas rasped, his voice weak but steady. "Glad you got my message." "We intercepted it just in time," Reeves said. "Bowman's team is holding the South Ridge, but they won't last long." Thomas turned to Tiana. The sight of her made him falter, exhaustion replaced by something brighter. "You did it," he said. "You got them here. Now let us do the rest," she whispered. His legs buckled, and Tiana caught him before he fell. His skin was cold, his pulse erratic. "Stage 4, Lena murmured grimly. "We're out of time." The Ephetherans worked in unison, their translator device filling the chamber with melodic tones. Administering prototype serum in 30 seconds. The vial they prepared glowed an ethereal blue, pulsing like a heartbeat. Tiana knelt beside Thomas, gripping his hand. "You hold on," she whispered fiercely. "You promised me we'd have time." "I don't break promises," he breathed, though his voice trembled. "Not to you." The serum coursed into his veins, spreading light through the network of dark tendrils beneath his skin. For a moment he convulsed, gasping. Then his body went still too still. "Thomas?" Tiana shook him. No response. "Thomas!" Mira began to cry. Lena turned toward the monitors. "Wait!" The neural display spiked. "It's working, look." Slowly, the black corruption receded, replaced by threads of radiant energy that intertwined like veins of light. His breathing steadied. His color returned. And then, with a sudden, shuddering gasp, Thomas opened his eyes, now glowing faintly with the same bioluminescent hue as the cure itself. "I can feel it," he whispered in awe. "The pain. It's gone." Tiana sobbed, pressing her forehead to his. "You're all right," she murmured. "You're home." The moment didn't last. The facility trembled violently as explosions rumbled through the mountain. Reeves grabbed the com. "Bowman's squad is down to half strength. We need to transmit the cure before the Consortium levels the place." Harrison moved to the control console. "Transmitters ready, but we'll need a diversion to keep them from jamming the signal." Thomas stood unsteady, but burning with new vitality. "Then we give them one." Tiana grabbed his arm. "No, you just survived. Because of you," he interrupted gently. "Because of what we've built together. If one act of kindness can save a life, maybe one sacrifice can save a galaxy." Their eyes locked, and she understood. He wasn't just trying to save himself anymore. He was fighting for every soul crushed beneath the Consortium's greed. "Then I'm going with you," she said. "You'll need someone who can bypass their security systems." He hesitated, then nodded. "All right, partner." Reeves's jaw tightened. "You've got 15 minutes. Make it count." Outside, fire lit the mountain night as Thomas and Tiana emerged into the storm. The Consortium soldiers advanced through the mist, their energy rifles flashing like lightning. Together, human and Invarian moved as one, his tactical precision, her grace, their trust seamless. When Thomas raised his pulse rifle, she was already there to cover him. When she reached the control node, he held the line. "Now, Tiana," he shouted. She pressed her electrified palm to the transmitter relay. The signal pulsed upward into the clouds, a beam of light carrying every secret, every file, every formula across 17 systems. Inside the facility, Reeves watched the data stream burst across the star map. "They did it," he whispered. "It's out." Above the battle, a flare of white light rippled through the night sky, a truth broadcast to the galaxy. On the ground, Tiana and Thomas stood side by side as the enemy forces closed in, the glow of the transmitter fading behind them. "What now?" she asked, her voice trembling. Thomas smiled faintly, his silver hair catching the rain. "Now," he said, "we see if kindness can really start a revolution." And as the first wave of soldiers descended upon them, the mountain blazed like dawn. 6 months later, New Geneva shone like a world reborn. The scars of war had been buried beneath glass towers and celebration banners, but those who remembered knew what it had cost. Inside the Interstellar Diplomatic Center, a cathedral of steel and light delegates from 27 systems filled the grand ballroom. Chandeliers of living crystal refracted every color of the spectrum, casting rainbows over a crowd that spanned the galaxy's diversity. At the heart of it all stood Thomas Blackwell, alive, whole, and impossibly vibrant. The cure that had saved him had done more than heal. It had renewed him. The gray in his hair gleamed silver instead of ash. The lines at his eyes spoke of laughter instead of weariness. When he spoke, representatives listened not to a magnate, but to the man who had defied an empire to give the stars their medicine back. Beside him stood Tiana Faro Blackwell, radiant in a flowing gown that shimmered like deep-sea light, her azure skin glowing softly beneath the chandeliers. Her hand rested over the curve of her belly, the quiet symbol of a future neither species had dared to imagine. Around them, the media whispered, the dignitaries murmured, and yet every voice faded when they looked upon the couple who had changed the galaxy with a single act of kindness. Professor Lin glided across the floor, his translucent form pulsing gently. The cooperative's network now spans 17 systems, his translator chimed proudly. All treatment facilities report stable operations. Holloway syndrome is by all measurable metrics eradicated. Thomas smiled faintly. Then we've done what the Consortium said was impossible. Captain Reeves approached, his dress uniform sharp, his grin crooked. Impossible, yes. But then, you always did make a habit of that. He offered Tiana a glass of non-alcoholic champagne. To the Blackwell Revolution, he toasted. She raised her glass, her eyes reflecting the light like water over sapphire stone. To truth, she replied softly, and to the people who believed in it. Across the ballroom, Lena watched them with pride and quiet amusement, Mira at her side in a silver-ribboned dress. The little girl laughed as ambassadors knelt to speak with her, fascinated by her glowing fingertips. She's already teaching the Ethetheran apprentices, Lena whispered to Harrison, who stood nearby. Says she wants to build a hospital on every planet with oceans. The stoic man's lips curved into the smallest of smiles. I believe she'd do it. Music swelled, the orchestra's strings shimmering through the hall. Thomas turned to Tiana and offered his hand. May I? She laughed, placing her palm against his. I thought humans found dancing at state functions tedious. It is, he said, leading her onto the floor. But with you, it feels like breathing. The crowd parted as they began to move, his hand at her back, hers at his shoulder. The world seemed to hold its breath. They danced beneath the starlit dome, and for a moment, the galaxy remembered what unity looked like. Not a treaty, not a speech, but the simple harmony of two souls moving together. When the music ended, applause rippled through the hall, thunderous and sincere. Thomas drew her close, unbothered by the flashing cameras or the awe in the crowd. Let them watch, he whispered. Maybe they'll learn something. Like what? She teased, her eyes bright with mischief. That the universe works best, he murmured, when we stop fearing the differences that make us whole. Later that night, beneath the twin moons, they slipped away to the Manor's rebuilt gardens. The air was cool and sweet, with the scent of flowering celis vines. Thomas sat on the stone bench, where months earlier he'd first confessed his fear of dying. Now he took Tiana's hand and placed it over his heart. He'll be here soon, he said, voice hushed. Have you decided on a name? She smiled. Nelvar. It means bridge between worlds. He repeated it slowly, reverently. Nelvar Blackwell, he said. Perfect. Silence settled between them, not empty, but alive with meaning. Above them, the stars shimmered, and somewhere in their light were the echoes of the choices that had brought them here. A bottle rolling across a floor, a moment of compassion, a defiance that became a movement. Tiana rested her head on his shoulder. Do you ever regret it? She asked quietly. Thomas looked toward the sea, the horizon glowing faintly with the city's light. Not for a heartbeat, he said. You saved me from a life half-lived. She laughed softly. You're the one who saved everyone. We saved each other, he corrected. That's the point. As if answering him, the unborn child kicked a firm, undeniable pulse of life. Tiana's breath caught, and Thomas laughed, a sound echoing across the terrace. "He's going to be stubborn," she said, smiling through tears. "With your compassion," he replied, kissing her forehead, "and your strength." From the balcony above, Harrison's voice carried down. "Sir, the Ethetheran delegation is ready for the final toast." Thomas rose and offered Tiana his arm. "Duty calls." She looped her fingers through his. Together, always. They walked back toward the golden lights of the celebration, two silhouettes framed by the glow of a world reborn. For the first time in recorded history, humans in variance and Ethetherans celebrated beneath the same roof, not as subjects or species, but as equals. As they entered the hall, the crowd fell silent, not out of formality, but reverence. The sight of them, once a billionaire and a rejected alien maid, embodied everything the galaxy had nearly forgotten, that greatness begins with compassion. And in that perfect stillness, where love and light converged, the entire hall rose in applause that needed no words. For what Thomas Blackwell had done next, what they had done together, had indeed left everyone speechless.